Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. This is episode 162. It is June of 2024. We're halfway done with 2024. It's hard to believe. But hey, the summer's upon us. It's good news. On today's episode, I'm really happy to have Steve with us. And Steven is... Stephen Webster is the co-founder and CEO of Asensei. His background includes stints at Adobe, Microsoft, amongst many other accomplishments and experiences. He launched Asensei back in around 2018. And the software does some very cool stuff. It's a platform that helps companies do a lot of things around personalized coaching for athletes, among other features. We'll have links in the show notes. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. And Stephen and Asensei were winners of the most innovative supplier by the Fitness Industry Technology Council for 2023. So without further ado, let's welcome Stephen to the podcast.
Well, listeners, as I said in the introduction, we have a special guest today. Stephen, how are you today, my friend?
Very well, Bryan. Excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. We've been able to collaborate over the last, I guess it's been about a year and a half or two, and I've been following the company closely. Congratulations on being recognized by FTSE as the most innovative company in the past year in the supply side of what you do.
So many. It's on the desk, Bryan.
Kudos to you and the team, and I've been a big fan of your technology. And looking at your background, I was happy we were having the chance to talk today on a Friday afternoon about your view. I mean, you've been in the business and you've been in technology for a long time. Your background in computer science from Edinburgh, you've done a lot of things with companies like Adobe, Microsoft, others. You have a very broad perspective, as well as your kind of background in karate and the like, which makes for an interesting kind of gumbo, as they say in Louisiana, of things that leads you to where you are at Asensei. But let's talk about your view on the digital landscape and health, wellness, and fitness right now. How do you see it?
I'm glad you asked that question because earlier in the year, I chose to kind of share a framework that's worked for me in the past. I was very lucky, first at Adobe and then at Microsoft, to work alongside a gentleman that many of you know, Geoffrey Moore. Geoffrey wrote a seminal book, Crossing the Chasm. And Jeff's always lived in the world of creating new categories and technology adoption, building on the work of others, standing on the shoulders of giants. And so I've been very lucky, first at Adobe and then at Microsoft, to be part of that whole kind of decades-long category creation exercises. And listen, when I started Asensei, that was the playbook. I'm like, I'm going to do what Jeff taught me. In fact, he was my first meeting in Woodside, California. And so, I've shared this framework with the industry that's based on Jeff's Crossing the Chasm work. And my belief is that both in connected health and in connected fitness, we're at that point that we call crossing the chasm. And I'll just quickly frame out, and I'm sure we'll touch on it through the conversation. But a category is created by the pioneers. It's the gold rush, right? The people that see a world that others don't see yet. They may be laughed at. People will feel threatened by them. And they don't sell to the mass market. They sell to the innovator. And I think we're past the point of the pioneer. And some of the pioneers make it, and some of them fall in the chasm. They run out of runway, or they get crushed in some other way, shape, or form. When you start to get across the chasm, we're reaching the mass market, and that's where I think we are today. And the mass market, is kind of split into the early and the late majority, the leaders and the laggards. And I think of the mass market in connected health and fitness as the digital natives. It's the people that have the Peloton of X on their venture deck.
Right.
But then there's the the legacy brands, or which one of my customers insists I start calling legendary brands, not legacy, because he thinks it makes them feel old. But when I look back at like other categories that have transformed, like maybe retail, some of the biggest e-commerce brands in the world today in certain categories are not Amazon. They're Walmart
Right.
and Macy's and Kohl's. They're the legacy brands that were not first to market, but they already had footprint and scale. So, to summarize the answer to your question, where are we today? I think we're in that chasm crossing moment where the mass market starts to show up. That's a moment of mass disruption, and some people will have their Kodak moment and they'll fall backwards into the chasm with BlackBerry and Blockbuster, and others will reimagine and reinvent their businesses by taking a legacy footprint and adding digital to it. So it's super exciting times.
It's always that. And I know that you have some very interesting and relevant views on that point, having followed your content, especially more lately. And I recommend everyone in the show notes, you're going to see links to Stephen's account so you can kind of see or hear directly from the horse's mouth on this post-podcast. So given that, what are some of the challenges that you see for the different categories of players that you just described? And given that, Christensen's innovator's dilemma dynamics come to play, right? So please share your views on that.
Oh my gosh, this is like a 30-minute conversation in itself. So I'll go quick.
It is.
Let's start with the pioneers. The pioneers are in a predicament. What got them here is not going to get them there. I think one of the classic challenges of a pioneer is you have to build everything yourself. You're using CapEx, not OpEx, to get in front of the market. But what that then means as you start to cross the chasm, what I call it's a fairly well accepted term, but pick and shovel companies, that decide not to dig for gold, but provide the picks and the shovels to dig for gold. Those are companies like Asensei. We're the pick and shovel for motion capture and movement recognition. So suddenly a company like Center or a company like Alter can do with us for a fraction of the cost and the risk, and using OpEx, not CapEx, what Peloton maybe took 3 or 4 years of gamble. And now Peloton and others are sitting on legacy technology, and you have that sunk cost fallacy of like, when do I let go of legacy? So that's the pioneers. The digital natives, the challenge is classic startup challenge. Like you've got the heartbeat of a hummingbird and you have 12 months runway in a very challenging funding environment. So I think the challenge for the digital natives is focus and execution. Like you have to be really clear on what you're going to do to get to the next milestone. And then for the legendary legacy brands, the Power Blocks and the Vertimaxes and the TRXs, right? I think the challenge is, do you believe in the future, or are you holding on to the past? And if you're Blockbuster, who could have acquired Netflix for $50 million, if you're Blockbuster and you're holding on to the past, there is a good chance you're going to be steamrolled by a digital native. But I think the opportunities for the legendary legacy brands are, build a digital app or build a content ecosystem or make acquisitions. I look at Inspire Fitness and Center as a great example of peanut butter and jelly. Let's put, equipment together with content and reimagine the business. So yeah, you can probably tell like challenges to me are just hooks for opportunities. It's like,
Sure.
What's this? No.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's well put. And also with respect to that, there is a valuation hangover right now from the go-go days of a few years ago, and that's adding another kind of dimension to this equation right now, because the risk-reward dynamic has shifted a bit, and so that's advantageous to some and a little more challenging to others. Would you have any commentary about that right now?
I think the challenge shows up differently depending on where you are on that adoption curve. If you're a pick and shovel company, capital is scarce. Investors want you to do more with less. Listen, here's the secret. Like, investors are struggling to raise their funds. So oftentimes the reason they're not deploying funds isn't really because you're not hitting your metrics or you've been at this a while. It's because they don't have a lot of powder. So again, if you're a pick and shovel company, you're really focused on profitability. a dollar from a customer is worth $10 from an investor. So I look at any companies that are trying to enter a market, even like ours. If they don't have several customers on the books, then the patience on the table, I think. And then, again, the opportunity, I think, for the legendary legacy brands is, there's technology to acquire. There's companies that are looking for a home where they can scale inside somewhere bigger. And so, I think we're seeing a lot of those kind of tuck-in M&A opportunities. I think we'll see more. Our customer Speed was just bought by our friends at Hydro, and I think we'll see more of that kind of consolidation. So, it's a challenging environment, but most great companies are built in a downturn.
That's right. I agree with that. I've told people that many times in my own experience in buying companies, I've always found that to be the opportunity. You never want to pay the top dollar. You want to find when there's blood in the streets when you make your best deal, right? So tell us about as a founder, about Asensei. Tell our audience and listeners, what does the product do? What was its nexus? Tell us the story about the business.
No, thanks for the opportunity. So, I mean, everybody's familiar with speech recognition, right? We gave a machine the ability to understand and interpret and respond to speech, and then you fast forward to 2019, I think Microsoft are paying $20 billion to acquire Nuance, one of the early leaders in the market. My CTO, my co-founder, started a speech recognition company that he took public in, I think, 2005 or 2009, I can't remember. So Asensei is very analogous to speech recognition, but we've chose to make human movement something a machine can understand. So we've added perception of human movement, and we've added deep understanding and insight around human movement. And, I always love to frame what we do with a question, with a quest. And, what if a machine could look at you and understand what you were doing? What opportunities does that unlock? And now, whether you're a personal trainer with far too many clients on the gym floor, or you're a physical therapist trying to administer PT over Zoom, or you're in the entertainment industry and people have got a headset on and you don't know if they're, playing the game properly or doing their fitness properly. There's just an embarrassment of opportunities of what you can do if you solve the problem of human movement recognition. And we're putting that in smartphones and televisions and connected fitness hardware, and in your clothing with sensors in your apparel as well. So we make human movement something a machine understands.
Yeah, and your model is really built around an SDK where you can deploy that in lots of different ways. And kind of referencing, if I'm correct, tell me what your point was before about, now these brands can receive the benefit of not having to sink capital in building this for themselves.
That's exactly it. I mean, my first venture deck I probably built in 2013, 2014. But two logos that were on it, brands that I loved, were Intel and Dolby. So we all know the Intel Inside jingle. You all just heard it in your head, as I said. Good marketing from my former CMO at Adobe. And Dolby, I've always been inspired by Dolby as a brand. I was kind of an audiophile as a kid. And we would literally choosing between two hi-fis or two televisions. You wanted the one that had the Dolby button on it because that stood for something. And so that's always been our vision for Asensei, is that we would be an ingredient brand that powered great products and great experiences. And so that's why we're like super excited by some of the brands that get to say they're powered by Asensei today.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool, Stephen. So as a founder, CEO, doing what you've done with your background, tell us a little bit about your journey with respect to that and some of the things that you learned.
Yeah, this is not my first rodeo. I sold my first company to Adobe, and that was a completely different life. That was when I'm always heretical. I'm always a little unorthodox. People are always like, well, who really wants that stuff? And that was back then. That was my wild notion that one day we wouldn't install software from CD-ROMs, but it would just run in our browser. And I was one of the original heretics that everybody from banks to travel agents to stores thought was crazy. But that's the company I built, a consultancy building what used to be called rich internet applications, and then just became shortened to internet applications, and now we just call them applications, right? And so that was my first company, and so that was kind of the entrepreneurial bug, if you like. And then I did my tour of duty at Adobe. I went and built a team at Microsoft. I've actually just been writing a LinkedIn post today. It's a very nostalgic look back to, the world I'm in today started 10 years ago at Microsoft. And so, I'll leave that as a plug. But yeah, while I was at Microsoft, I just, lots of things were happening. This is the time that Nike were putting sensors in shoes and Nike running. This was a time of Microsoft Connect, and suddenly you could have this piece of hardware that could track your body. And I was working with brands like Gatorade and Xbox Fitness. AI was like very early, infancy, but this idea of conversational assistance and conversational understanding. So that was the technology world I was living in. And as you kind of alluded, I've competed, I've coached, I've captained martial arts for most of my life, karate and jiu-jitsu. And so I've always wanted to scratch that itch of how do you teach physical exercise at digital scale? And it's impossible if you don't have eyes on the athlete. If you can't see and give feedback in real time, you can't coach. You're learning from a book or learning from a video. And so Microsoft was this moment of, I think the enabling technologies are emerging. And I had that, any entrepreneur who's still doing a business 10 years on will tell you there's this moment of panic that now that you've thought of the idea, surely everyone else has as well, right? And I remember I was on vacation with my wife in Colorado. I remember standing at the top of Snowmass Mountain, skiing terribly. I was like, the world needs this. The world needs an AI coach in your ear to get me safely to the bottom of the slopes. And on Snowmass Mountain, I decided to quit my job at Microsoft and start Asensei.
That's a great story, Stephen. That's a great story. And by the way, I really identify with the title of heretic. I go by that reference in my own mind and have for quite a long time. So I really
my boss at Microsoft called me an agitator. I think that was
I've had more than a few in my life laugh at me, and it's always satisfying to see some of what you saw coming come. So that's always a lot of fun.
Been wrong as well.
Yeah, that's okay. I've been wrong too, but it's good when you get something right like that before other people see it. Do you have any final words of wisdom you'd like to share to the audience about what's happening? Any further insights for our listeners?
Listen, I think whether you're in health or whether you're in fitness, whether you're at home or whether you're in brick and mortar, whether you're big box or boutique, you are in a digital transformation of your industry. And everybody wants to, not everybody, that's unfair. There's a lot of, in real life is back, and like digital is not going anywhere, and connected fitness is dead. And I try to not participate in that noise. It's more fear of change and fear of the future than it is what's the opportunity ahead. So I think, leaders lead. And so I think for leaders, it's like, how do we lead into this future and how do we lean into the future? And I would just kind of bookend it with the framework we spoke about at the beginning. You need to know, are you a pioneer? Are you a digital native? Are you a legacy brand? Are you a pick and shovel company? And you need to have a sense of an understanding of where the market is in the adoption curve for particular technologies. If you know that, and I've written about this a lot on LinkedIn, and we'll put stuff in the show notes, and I'm happy to speak to people individually. I just, I'm a recovering consultant. I love to solve other people's problems. But I think really it's that Sun Tzu saying of like, know yourself, then you know your enemy. And I think, you really need to know yourself and be honest about the predicament you face. And then, I offer people strategies. Some of them include Asensei and some of them don't, but I'll offer people strategies of, if this is who you are, then this is what you should be thinking about. And the last thing I would say is the fast follow of the digitization of an industry is the personalization of that industry. And so in your digital strategy, at every touch point, you have to be thinking about how do you fundamentally, Asensei is the enabling technology for personalization of how you're consuming fitness content. But we're not the only personalization technology. But I think that's something, if you feel like you're on your heels and you want to get on your toes a little bit, don't just think about how do I participate in the digital transformation of the category, but how do I think about the role of personalization at every single one of my customers' touch points so that I can meet them where they are and know who they are in that moment. So yeah, exciting times ahead. Ignore the noise. Investors will invest again. The markets will bounce back and all will be good.
I agree with that. And remember, everyone, the greatest product and services and business models in this space have not been invented yet. They're on their way.
Right.
So, Stephen, awesome to see you again. Thank you so much for spending time and sharing your wisdom, and congrats on all your success as Asensei with that company and that team. I'm really, really happy that you were able to spend some time with our listeners today.
And if I can say one last thing, Bryan,
Please.
That trophy is not mine, it's the team's. That reflects the heart of a phenomenally talented team who share the vision more than I do. So good moment to recognize the team there.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Stephen, so much. And everyone, in the show notes, you're going to find links and other resources to learn more about Asensei and to connect and follow with Stephen. It's very worthwhile listening to what he shares. He has a lot of insight, and I'm very grateful again for you making time for us today.
Thanks so much.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.